Eddie Van Halen plugged in his red, white, and black striped Frankenstrat guitar and immediately knew something was wrong. The sound was thin, lifeless, completely wrong for what was supposed to be the biggest show of Van Halen's career. It was October 23rd, 1981, at the Dallas State Fair Arena. 22,000 fans were waiting outside, and tickets had sold out in 47 minutes. But the sound was garbage, and Jerry Washington was nowhere to be found. Jerry wasn't just Van Halen's sound engineer, he was Eddie's technical wizard, the only person who understood the intricate modifications Eddie had made to his amplifiers, the voltage adjustments that created the Brown sound. Jerry had been with the band for 3 years, ever since Eddie heard him mixing sound for a local band and realized he was listening to a genius. Eddie walked across the stage, testing different positions, but nothing worked. The tone that had taken him years to perfect sounded like it was coming through a transistor radio. He unplugged the Frankenstrat and went looking for Jerry. Backstage was controlled chaos. Roadies hauling equipment, security guards with radios, venue staff running through last-minute checks. David Lee Roth was in his dressing room doing vocal warm-ups. Alex Van Halen was behind his drum kit. Michael Anthony was checking bass lines. But no Jerry. Eddie found Tommy, one of the guitar techs. "Where's Jerry?" Eddie asked. Tommy looked uncomfortable. "Haven't seen him since we got here, Ed." Eddie walked through the backstage area methodically, past the catering table, past the green room, past the production office. Still no Jerry. That's when Eddie heard it. Jerry's voice, tight with frustration, coming from outside. Eddie followed the sound through a door marked "Staff Only" that led to the venue's rear loading area. And there was Jerry Washington, sitting on a concrete loading dock, his mixing board setup abandoned, while he sat alone in what looked like a service alley behind the arena. Jerry was 34, originally from Detroit, with technical skills that bordered on supernatural. He could identify a blown tube by listening to it from 50 feet away, and he was sitting alone behind the Dallas State Fair Arena, looking like someone had just told him his family had died. "Jerry," Eddie called, walking toward him, "what are you doing out here? We've got sound check in 20 minutes. Jerry looked up. His face was composed, professional, the way he always looked when he was working. But Eddie could see something underneath. Anger, maybe, or just exhaustion. "They wouldn't let me in the front," Jerry said quietly. Eddie stopped walking. "What do you mean?" Jerry gestured toward the building. "Security guard at the main entrance. Said colored personnel had to use the service entrance. Said it was building policy." The words hit Eddie like a physical blow. He stood there for a moment, processing what he just heard. In 1981, in America, at a venue where they were paying Jerry Washington more money than most people made in a year to do a job that required the kind of technical expertise that maybe 12 people in the country possessed. "Where's the guard?" Eddie asked. "Eddie, don't." Jerry stood up. "It's not worth making a scene. I've dealt with this before. I'll just go around back. It's fine." "It's not fine." Eddie's voice was quiet, but there was something in his tone that Jerry had learned to recognize over 3 years of working together. When Eddie Van Halen spoke in that particular tone, things were about to happen. Eddie walked back through the staff door, Jerry following behind. They went through the backstage area toward the main entrance where band members typically arrived. The security guard was still there, a big man in his 50s wearing a uniform that looked official. His name tag read, "Frank Morrison, head of security." "Excuse me," Eddie said. Morrison looked up and immediately recognized him. "Mr. Van Halen, an honor, sir. Is there anything you need?" "Yes," Eddie said. "I need you to explain why you told my sound engineer he couldn't use the main entrance." Morrison's smile flickered. He glanced at Jerry, then back at Eddie. "That's just standard policy, sir. Service personnel use the service entrance." "He's not service personnel," Eddie said. "He's Van Halen's sound engineer." Morrison's smile was getting forced. "I understand, sir, but the colored staff use the back entrance. It's not my rule." Eddie felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't just some random rule. This was institutional policy in 1981. "Who made this policy?" Eddie asked. "That would be Mr. Thompson, sir. Warren Thompson. He owns the venue." "Get him." Morrison spoke into his radio. "Mr. Thompson to the main entrance, please." 5 minutes later, Warren Big Bill Thompson appeared. He was a large man in an expensive suit with confident bearing. He walked up with his hand extended and a smile that was all teeth. "Eddie Van Halen," Thompson said. "Big Bill Thompson, welcome to Dallas." Eddie didn't return the smile. "Mr. Thompson, your security guard told my sound engineer he couldn't use the main entrance because he's black." Thompson's smile didn't waver, but something shifted behind his eyes. "That's just standard procedure, Eddie. We have to maintain certain protocols. Technical staff uses the service entrances." "He's not just technical staff," Eddie said. "He's Van Halen's sound engineer." Thompson spread his hands like he was being reasonable. "I understand, but we have policies that have been in place for years. The colored employees use the appropriate entrances. It's not discriminatory, it's organizational." Jerry spoke up for the first time. "Mr. Thompson, I'm not an employee. I work for Van Halen directly. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking to be treated like any other member of the band's technical team." Thompson looked at Jerry like he was a child who didn't understand how the adult world worked. "Son, I appreciate your position, I truly do. But this is Texas. We have ways of doing things that work for everyone. You'll still get into the building. You'll still do your job. You'll still get paid. What difference does it make which door you use?" The difference, Eddie thought, is that you're telling a man who's forgotten more about audio engineering than most people will ever know that he's not good enough to walk through the same door as everyone else because of the color of his skin. Eddie looked at Jerry. 3 years ago, Jerry had been working for a fraction of what he was worth, mixing sound for bands that didn't appreciate his skills because venue owners like Thompson created systems that kept talented people in boxes. Eddie had hired Jerry not just because he was good at his job, but because he was the best at his job. Jerry had made Van Halen sound bigger, cleaner, more powerful. He'd helped Eddie achieve tones that other guitarists spent fortunes trying to replicate. And now Warren Thompson was telling Jerry he had to walk around to the back of the building like he was delivering groceries. "Mr. Thompson," Eddie said quietly, "either Jerry comes through the main entrance with the rest of my team or there's no show tonight." Thompson laughed. It was a hearty, confident laugh, the kind of laugh that suggested Eddie had just told a joke that wasn't particularly funny. "Eddie, you're kidding, right? You can't cancel a show over something like this. We have 22,000 people waiting. You have contracts, obligations." Eddie stared at him. "Then there's no show." The laughter died. Thompson's face went through several changes of expression as he realized Eddie wasn't making a negotiation. He was stating a fact. "Now hold on," Thompson said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Let's be reasonable here. This is business. You have legal obligations. I've invested a fortune in advertising, security, staffing. We're talking about $300,000 in revenue tonight. You can't just walk away because of some minor protocol issue." "It's not minor to me," Eddie said. Thompson tried a different approach. His voice became softer, more persuasive. "Eddie, I understand you want to stand by your people. I respect that. But this is bigger than one night, bigger than one person. If I start making exceptions to policies that have been in place for decades, where does it end? I've got investors, board members, people I answer to. This isn't just my decision. It's your building," Eddie said. "It's your decision." Thompson's persuasive tone was giving way to frustration. "You're being unrealistic. This is Texas in 1981. These are the customs, the social structure. If I let colored staff use the main entrance, I'll have half my customers complaining. I'll have sponsors pulling out. I'll have community leaders asking questions. You're asking me to risk my entire business for one employee." "He's not just an employee," Eddie said. "He's Van Halen's sound engineer. And if you won't treat him with respect, then we're leaving." Thompson's face was reddening now. "You can't be serious. Do you have any idea what this will cost? The refunds alone will bankrupt me. The lawsuits, the lost reputation. You're talking about destroying everything I've built." Eddie looked at Jerry, who was standing quietly beside him, watching this conversation unfold with the expression of someone who'd seen it all before. Someone who'd learned not to expect too much and tried not to hope for too much. "Jerry," Eddie said, "do you want to work under these conditions?" Jerry met his eyes. "No, sir, I don't." Jerry followed, but he looked conflicted. "Eddie, you don't have to do this. I can use the back entrance. It's not worth losing all this money. Eddie stopped and turned around. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but everyone in the vicinity could hear him clearly. Jerry, 3 years ago, you were the best sound engineer I'd ever heard, working for peanuts because people like him decided where you belonged. I hired you because you're the best at what you do. Not because you're black, not in spite of being black, but because you make my guitar sound like God intended it to sound. And I'll be damned if I'm going to stand here and let someone tell you that your skin color makes you less deserving of basic respect. Thompson made one last desperate attempt. Eddie, think about your fans. Think about the kids who saved money for tickets, who've been waiting years to see Van Halen live. You're going to disappoint 22,000 people because of this? Eddie looked at Thompson for a long moment. Mr. Thompson, in 10 years, nobody's going to remember this canceled show, but they'll remember how you treated people. And when this country finally changes, and it will change, you'll be on the wrong side of history. Eddie and Jerry walked out to the parking lot where the band's equipment trucks were waiting. Word spread quickly through the venue staff. By the time they reached the trucks, David Lee Roth had appeared, along with Alex and Michael Anthony. "What the hell is going on?" Roth demanded. "We go on in 2 hours," Eddie explained briefly. Roth listened, his face going through various expressions of disbelief, anger, and calculation. "So we're canceling a $300,000 show because some Texas asshole wants Jerry to use the back door?" Roth asked. "Yes," Eddie said. Roth looked at Jerry, then back at Eddie. "Fuck it," he said finally. "Pack it up. We're out of here." Alex Van Halen had been listening quietly. Now he spoke up. "Good," he said simply. "Some things are more important than money." Michael Anthony nodded. "Jerry's family. We don't leave family behind." The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Thompson. By 7 o'clock, word had leaked that the show was canceled. 22,000 fans demanded explanations and refunds. When the real reason emerged, the reaction was split but intense. Younger fans began questioning why such policies existed. Thompson tried to blame Van Halen, but too many people had witnessed the confrontation. Local newspapers picked up the story. National music magazines covered it extensively. Rolling Stone ran a feature titled Van Halen's Stand, When Rock and Roll Met Civil Rights. Thompson sued Van Halen, demanding compensation for lost revenue and breach of contract. The case went to court 6 months later. Eddie's lawyers argued that contracts requiring racial discrimination were void. The judge agreed, ruling that Van Halen owed no damages and that the venue's policies violated federal civil rights laws. Thompson's venue never recovered. Within 18 months, the Dallas State Fair Arena was in bankruptcy. Thompson lost everything. Van Halen implemented a new policy. Any venue wanting to book them had to sign a rider stating that all band personnel, regardless of race, would use the same entrances and facilities. Some venues refused. Eddie walked away from an estimated $2 million over the next 5 years rather than compromise. Jerry Washington stayed with Van Halen until 1987. In a 1985 interview, he said, "Eddie taught me that night that some things are worth more than any paycheck." He gave up $300,000 because he refused to participate in a system that treated me as less than human. You don't forget something like that. Warren Thompson died in 1989, 8 years after the canceled concert. He died bitter and broke, still blaming Van Halen for his financial ruin. But Thompson destroyed himself by clinging to a dying system, by refusing to treat people with basic human dignity. The story became legendary among musicians. It inspired other artists to include similar clauses in their contracts. Little by little, venue by venue, the old policies began to crumble. Eddie never spoke much about it publicly. When reporters asked, he'd simply say, "I work with the best people I can find. I don't care what color they are, and I won't perform anywhere that treats them differently than they treat me." In 2004, Eddie was asked about the biggest sacrifice he'd ever made for his principles. "Dallas, 1981, he said without hesitation. "I walked away from the biggest show of our career because the venue owner wanted my sound engineer to use a different entrance. People thought I was crazy, but I wasn't losing anything. I was refusing to profit from something that was morally wrong." The interviewer asked if he'd do it again. Eddie smiled quietly. "In a heartbeat. Some things matter more than money. Treating people with dignity is one of them."